Welcome to the Cultivation Cast by Black Dog Horticulture Technologies and Consulting. I've got Kevin here. I'm Noah. We have a special guest here today. Why? Because it's summertime. I know you might watch this in the middle of winter down the road, but today it's summer. And as a matter of fact, Jay was just outside and said his phone registered the first 100 degrees here in Longmont, Colorado that we've seen this year. So it is hot, and we have plenty of customers in even hotter places like Oklahoma or Arizona, places like that. So it is summertime, and if you're a grower, it doesn't necessarily mean you get to go play at the beach. It means you're dealing with heat that we don't deal with the rest of the year. Kevin, anyone that's done a lot of indoor gardening knows that you've got the outside heat pushing in on your building, and we're all generally generating heat inside of our grow rooms in the form of lighting. So we thought it'd be really interesting to bring in one of our most trusted experts in the HVAC arena today. So we've got a very special guest in that he is completely knowledgeable. I know enough to be very dangerous in a grow room with regards to HVAC and ventilation. This guy really knows his stuff. He knows it inside and out, and every time I speak with him, I learn something, so I hope you learned something today in the podcast. So without further ado, let's jump right in today. We've got Bryson Geyer here. He's the president of E3 Service Group, and he is a third-gen HVAC tech, so he eats, sleeps, and breathes HVAC stuff. Just to be clear, if you do work with them, I don't want to even sell them short there. They do get involved, and we've worked with them on full kind of project management, general contracting, GC stuff. So if they need to, they do others, but their area, their wheelhouse is really ventilation. So cooling, dehumidification, all the air handling stuff that you could do. But they get involved in all engineering. But today we will focus on the HVAC. So Bryson, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the kind words.
Oh, definitely. It's been great doing the work we've done with you. So we met Bryson, as you should anybody in the industry, through referrals. You know, we talk to a lot of people, meet a lot of people. We had a project. Next thing you know, you get turned on to somebody that's really good. We've worked on with projects and all that. So let's just start let's go way back to the beginning. Bryson, all of us, we always like the stories. How did you've been doing this forever, since before cannabis was above board. Maybe you did some HVAC work before then, but how did you get pulled in and get involved in the cannabis space? Let's get a little history.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, I'm third generation heat and air. I have a heat and air conditioning company, and in all honesty, cannabis kind of took my company over. We were right in the middle of when Denver very first went legal. I had a lot of friends that I had, done work for in the past, like you say, but they started reaching out to me and telling me, hey man, we need 300 air conditioners. And I thought, man, you don't need 300 air conditioners. And we go over there and look, and yeah, they would need 300 air conditioners. So I had kind of messed around with grow facilities in the past, but it had always been stuff that was engineered by architects and mechanical engineers who didn't really know what they were getting into. I remember a lot back in the day, guys were still sizing for square footage and not for heat loads. Um, I went through a pretty nasty divorce, and I had kept the company rolling, but we were building pizza shops for Marco's Pizza and for Texas Roadhouse. We had the national contract on every Texas Roadhouse west of the Mississippi. So we were always constantly on the road, constantly living in hotel rooms, and then this cannabis thing really started to take off. I met a girl in a bar. I knew her for 3 days. We got married. My wife Emily. We were going on 10 years now. Be 11 years next week. Next week be 11 years. Um, she had a background of being a grower, and she was a grower back in the old caregiver days, 72 plant count, and kind of some gray areas. And they had been raided, and she lost her. She owned a warehouse down off Jason Street and a house up in Boulder. They were running 60 lights in the basement, and the feds kind of came in and scooped all that stuff up. And so she had gotten away with no real legal ramifications, but she had gotten totally out of cannabis. So I met her as a bartender, and as her and I started to talk, she introduced me to a lot of her friends, and those were guys that were just getting legal and building grows all over Denver. The thing about them being my wife's friends were, they called me at, midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, Christmas night, New Year's Eve night, that air conditioners weren't working. And usually I would tell them, oh, well, I'll be out there Monday. We'll take a look at it later. And then I would hang up the phone and my wife would say, no, you can't do this. You have to go down there right now. You have to get this thing up and going. So I started to learn really what it took to keep all these cultivation facilities really running at optimal. We learned how to keep air conditioners running in Niles, Michigan, where it gets negative 38 degrees, and all the way up to Phoenix, Arizona, where it gets 120 degrees. And so we had to really try to, go above and beyond of what the engineers knew and really what the manufacturers of these equipment, what they knew to try to keep these things running where they weren't designed to run. So we learned a lot of stuff, School of Hard Knocks. Very proud of it. We learned like everybody says the old cliche in cannabis. We learned what not to do, and we really tried to push that forward with keeping customer service in mind. Back in those days, our customers were not like the type of guys that would go get an attorney and sue you if their air conditioners didn't work. They were, in all honesty, we were working a lot with, Colombia cartel, triads, Russian mafia, they were, and all great guys that I'm still friends with to this day. But there was definitely an expectation of, hey, I don't care what that engineer said. I bought this air conditioner from you. I want this air conditioner running. So, we do things very non-traditional as far as HVAC goes, but I really feel like I was a trendsetter in a lot of the things that we do in cannabis. We worked with and in dehumidifiers. They're my absolute go-to on the dehumidification side. We helped those guys design those dehumidifiers when they very first came out on the market. We worked with Quest. We were Quest's only rep here in Colorado for a short time, as far as working on their unit. So if there was a failure, they called the 1-800 number. Quest would dispatch us out to go work on their dehumidifiers. So we were really kind of the trendsetters with HVAC, back in the beginning. And like you said, we're 100% word of mouth. We don't advertise, and that's by the grace of God. That phone rings every day, and we travel. No job too big, no job too small, and we have offices in 5 states now. We're working in 15 states, and with the goal of becoming a total, complete nationwide company by the end of 2025, and hopefully to be global here in the near future. Doing some stuff in Canada. We're working on one in Sao Paulo, Brazil right now. We've done some stuff in Jamaica, and so yeah, I'm really looking to go out globally.
Any calls from Germany yet? They're just going legal now.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have some friends that there was just a big expo show out there, I think not too long ago, like 2 weeks ago, something like that. And yeah, and definitely had some questions on stuff. We've even gone so far as to we aren't necessarily the installer on projects like that. We do a lot of help on the front end design, and then we do a lot of, like you were talking earlier, construction management, and via Zoom calls or, over the phone, and trying to help guys make sure that we're building the right cultivation facility for the terrain and, the part of the world that exists in.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a lot of info. So you said some interesting things there. First off, yeah, shout out to Andon. I think we spoke about Mike, that we both know him from back in the day when it was just when he was like the one sales guy. We got it in and very early on, and we do love him. That is good equipment. If you're looking for a dehu, you heard it from the specialist at Bryson, and it is the way to go. And that's one of the ones we sell.
Actually, just to step in there, I met Mike through his brother Brian Bush. He's a salesman for New Cal. They're an HVAC system or a provider that sells chemicals that clean coils and stuff like that. That's another HVAC family. Those guys go back generations. You know, I've known them literally before cannabis. So it's really cool to be able to work with guys like that that transitioned with cannabis. But yeah, I can't say enough good about Mike Bush and the Bush family. They're great guys.
Yeah, I have nothing but good things to say about him as well. So a lot of good stuff there. It's great to hear the scale of your business and love to see you continue to grow. One of the reasons we wanted to have you on is I think Kevin and I would agree we've done a lot of projects, you know, obviously not as many as you in your life, but when somebody says to me like, what is the number one problem, you know, that you run into? And we get involved on the lighting, but as like you, we get sucked into other parts, and we've done full design and everything, right? And I always say the number one place, why they do this, the number one place everybody cuts corners is HVAC, is cooling or dehu. Often it's dehu, sometimes it's the actual cooling, but they always cut corners. And I think, and I want you to weigh in on this, I think it's often because they get told, hey, this is how many BTUs you need. I'm like, cool, that's the baseline, right? If you add up all the electrical equipment in the facility, it's gonna put out heat, maybe take a little heat load from outside and put it in there, and I'm oversimplifying this for you, and then they just take that number. They don't put any overhead in, any wiggle room or anything, I don't know, but how many times have we seen beautiful grows set up? We've seen multi-million-dollar grows set up, and the one thing they did is screw up that, and it takes down the grow.
Yeah, and I mean, it's typically they can't maintain adequately cool temperature, or they dramatically undersize their dehumidification, and sometimes they don't even notice that they undersize their dehumidification, because during the day while the lights are on, the air conditioning is acting as a dehumidifier. But when the lights turn off and suddenly the room can maintain a cool temperature fairly easily, air conditioning isn't running as much, and that's when you need the dehumidifiers. And if you're not in your room when the lights are off, you may not, if you're not monitoring things better or as closely as you should, may not realize your humidity is spiking up to 80–90% at night.
So when we get a project and we work on it, we'll often give them that feedback. We'll say, hey, here's the electrical stuff we're putting in there. We know our lights are the biggest problem to grow, and that they grow plants, but they also generate heat. It's what lights do. So we can give them the loads, and we say this. The next thing out of our mouth is, go find yourself a good HVAC engineer. Now, we'd often point them to D3, but we always said, we're not HVAC engineers, nor do we want to be, nor will we ever be. You need to work with an expert, and it should be someone who can not only install it, but maintain it. That's a big part, because HVAC systems will break eventually, not if. It's not when, it's not if, it's when. They're going to break. So having that company to stand behind it, as you spoke about earlier, is critical. So we experience this on our side where everybody seems to come up short. Tell the listeners, tell the people, when somebody comes to you with a project, how do you keep them from having those problems? Because look, HVAC is one of those things, when it's done right, you don't think about it. It's just there in the background running. Lucky, by the grace of God, your room is cool and you can grow flowers, you said, right? However, why is it that we run into so many projects where they end up just being short? It's not that it's not working, but how is it you help, and how do you get people through projects and avoid that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a couple of different answers to that question, right? Number one, we do see, a lot of times people are cutting corners, but I think they're cutting corners for different reasons. Number one, obviously your mechanical is usually the biggest check you're going to write, so cost is always something that, hits everybody up front. But one of the other things that we see a lot, one that I'm just looking at today, I just got off a Zoom call with some guys up in Delhi, New York. They wanted a Cadillac version. They trusted an engineer, and with that engineer working with his contractor, the contractors get so used to cutting corners. It doesn't matter if it's, a school or a hospital or an office building. Everybody wants to bring value to the table. And so what they try to do is explain to people, oh, you don't need all that. This is the cheapest way to do something, right? So guys, I think, have just been beat down so much over the years that they just want to go the cheapest route as fast as possible. So a lot of times, it's not even the customer that's trying to cut corners. Sometimes it's the engineer or the contractor. These grow facilities can be a can just be an absolute dream for a mechanical engineer, right? When they get brought, engineers like to fix problems. So when they get brought something like this that potentially nobody has ever done before, we see a lot of over engineering that can lead to guys just getting in their own way. We're doing one in Columbia, Missouri right now. I've never seen anything like it. They have 25-ton rooftop units. And on the supply side, they added gigantic booster fans in line with the supply duct to help push, a greater distance to get into the building, and then added charcoal filters in front of the supply fan, which makes no sense to me. But inevitably, what happens is nobody has gone up to change those charcoal filters in 2 years. So the filters have become clogged. It's now put pressure on those inline booster fans, which they're burning up booster fans left and right, which now puts pressure on the rooftop unit, which is causing rooftop units to fail. So a lot of times it does just, come down to really the engineering. You really have to pay attention to how something is engineered. And chances are, if it looks funny to you, it probably is. There's probably just somebody overthinking a solution. I think one of the other things too, to go back to the lighting. The lighting is the most important in any grow facility. When we sit down to design a grow facility, the first question I have for any customer is, okay, what kind of lights are you using? Because the lights are going to tell us, how much power we need. It's going to tell us our wattage. That's going to tell us our BTU output. It's also going to tell us our dehumidification. As you guys know, there's a lot of times what we see happen, especially back here in Denver, was when we switched over from, double-ended metal halides or whatever to LED. A lot of guys just went in and swapped their lights out. They took down one double-ended and they added a LED. And what had happened was they were overcooled for those rooms, which led to the rooms being too dry because they were dehumidifying through being overcooled. I just think that the lighting is the most important aspect to designing any grow facility. We have to get the lighting correct. And then when we decide to pick that horse for that race, and these are the lights we're going to go with, we can't change those lights right before everything gets built. And we see that time and time again where guys just think, okay, well, I want to hurry up and get this on paper so that I could get drawings, so that I could get bids, and then we'll decide what kind of lights we're going to get. It doesn't work that way. Our lights tie the entire project together. One of the things that I personally love about Black Dog, and what I love working with you guys, I remember back in the very first MJ BizCons, back in the first geez, what Endo Expos, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Black Dog was always front and center. And I remember everybody would, laugh and snark and say, LEDs, oh, you'll never get LEDs in this space. And I remember you, Noah, sitting underneath those lights, just sweating all day, trying to explain to people why LEDs would be there. And it's so funny to see that the industry is now caught up to what you guys were saying 8, 10 years ago about switching to LED. I love LED, and I tried to stay away from it so much as a heat and air conditioning contractor, right? Because at the end of the day, I make my money selling air conditioners, and it's less air conditioners putting in LEDs. But what I found out over the years is that you need a lot more on your dehumidification side. I think back to your point earlier, where the lights go off, and then we deal with our humidity spikes. When we're talking, LED as compared to, older, first generation lights, we need almost 3 times the dehumidification in an LED room as we would need in a double-ended room. And the reason that we say that is because, our air conditioning loads were based at such a high level because of the heat loads coming off of those double endeds. A side effect of refrigeration is dehumidification. So the more air conditioners we put into a space, the more we're dehumidifying. By lessening the air conditioning load in something, we're going to see that we need more dehumidification to make up for that. If we're talking about an LED where we're looking at like a, an 80-degree leaf surface temperature versus like a 72-degree leaf surface temperature, we're not going to have as much cooling, which means we're going to need more dehumidification. So some of the things that I was always afraid of as an air conditioning guy and selling air conditioners, what we found out was that, boy, we're going to need a lot more dehumidification in these rooms. So sorry, it's kind of a long answer to
No, no.
It's ironic because I think it was just last week we saw a podcast with some, I believe they were breeders, but growers, anyhow, that were advocating for a checkerboard of LED and HPS fixtures because they, quote, like to turn on the HPS to dry out the plants more. They don't understand that what they're doing is just increasing the heat, causing the air conditioning to become their dehumidifier, when realistically, instead of adding HPS back in, what they need is more dehumidification capacity, and then they would get way better light on their plants and not have toxic mercury over it and pay less for their electric bill and everything else. But instead, their logic was, well, we need the HPS to help dry out our room.
I will say that number's higher than I thought, and I'm going to geek out for a sec, is we know, and again, we are not HVAC techs, we know though from selling a lot of dehus, which we do sell, not HVAC, but we do sell the end and dehus, is that the rating curve, the derating curve works backwards as we run our rooms warmer than the HPS days. So we get more dehumidification capacity even than it's rated on the unit. If it says it's a 500, liter pint dehu, it might actually get 600 in our rooms because it's running warmer. During the day, lights on. Now lights off, different game. So I'd ask you, it's 3 times, even though have you had to deal, because this is the stuff you deal with the engineering, is you're taking into account that during the day, as Kevin said, with the lights on, I'm going to run the room warmer with LEDs, even though there's less heat load, whereas HPS, you run the room cooler with more heat load. How does all that play in together?
Yeah, and really, I think that, number one, just based off of what everything you guys just said, right? This industry is still in such an infancy stage, right? There are still so many things that we are just learning. Even as 10 years into this thing, every time we pick up a new state, every time somebody comes up with a new light or a new racking system or a new dehumidifier, we always have to go back to the drawing table on all of this. I think that there are formulas and calculations. There are numbers, and numbers don't lie. But knowing when to apply certain formulas can totally change everything, right? I mean, I remember when VPD came out and that became a big thing, right? I mean, it totally changed everything that we thought we knew about dialing in grow rooms. I know that around that same time when a lot of guys started switching over to LEDs from double endeds, that was about the same time that everybody started to pay attention to VPD charts. And what we found out was totally by default, some of the worst grows that I know I had a hand in building way back in 2012 or so, these guys were getting really good weight, but it was by default because we didn't have enough heat, I'm sorry, we had too much cooling in those rooms, or sometimes we didn't have enough cooling in those rooms, which really made those plants sweat and really made that VPD start kicking in way before we even knew what VPD was. So, and I'm not saying that, we didn't know what VPD was as a industry. Obviously, that comes from greenhouse and guys that have been growing indoors for years. But when we started to really see that applied to cannabis, we started to realize by default, some of these things were dead on where they were supposed to be, where I thought, oh, you guys are 10 tons short of cooling in there. And so now that we've learned all of these things and we can figure out, a watt is a watt is a watt, and 3.41 BTUs per watt, and we can figure out these calculations, and we know most guys are going to water 1 gallon per plant per day, and we can take those averages and we can figure it out. A lot of people have, a lot of companies that are out there have different formulas to get to the same answer. And it's so weird because you wouldn't think that, I can tell you right now, the way I do my dehumidification calculations are totally different from the way Andon does their dehumidification calculations. But we always end up within 10% of each other, which I still think is just crazy. But there's a lot of different ways to get to those answers. But I think that all of that comes from this very short term of history that we've actually had in the last 10 years since cannabis has been legal, where guys can come out of the basement and come out of these warehouses and be able to talk to one another and say, well, how did you guys figure this out? How did you get to this? And really kind of set apart the engineers and the contractors that are in this industry that know what they're doing, to really apply that when we're building a new facility.
Gotcha. So if I ask you, I said our number one shortfall that we've seen in projects, I mean, toot our own horn, we can deploy lights, we have software, we can do that right. It's really not that difficult if you know what you're doing. You'd probably say the HVAC's not that difficult, but again, I would say the number one challenge I see in projects is either cooling or dehu. Again, I think it's different reasons. Sometimes budgetary, sometimes a bad engineer on the job, whatever, but it seems to be the problem. In the projects you've worked on, tell our listeners, what are the biggest problems you run into, or let me say, the most common problems you run into?
I wish I could say they were common. I think that, I end up with, know, uh, there's a lot of different ways to heat and cool buildings, right? And so each one of those is going to come with their own package of problems, so to speak. I think that one of the biggest things that I just can't stand seeing when we walk into new facilities or even old facilities is you know, we have to realize that anything with mechanical parts is going to fail, right? So the biggest thing that I look at, and the reason why my company is E3 Service Group and not E3 Heating and Air or E3 Mechanical, we try to focus on the service side of things, right? When I build a grow facility, I want to be in that building the next 20 years with that grower, right? When you build everything out, there comes a day where the architect leaves, the general contractor leaves, the electrician leaves, the plumber leaves, but your HVAC guy, you're going to be married to for the next 20 years, right? Because he's got to come maintenance, he's got to clean filters, clean coils, make sure that is running correctly. Um, I hate seeing projects where guys just over engineer things and they come up with, big three-phase chillers or something. You know, there is a time and a place for chillers. There's a time and a place for rooftop units. There's a time and a place for split systems. But one of the things that you really have to think about is, when they fail, how quick can you get the parts and where do you find the parts? Can you get to the parts locally, right? I like using residential split systems in all of my grow facilities. We're doing one in Phoenix, Arizona right now that has 423 residential split systems on there. And most people look at that and they say, oh, that's absolutely crazy. Why would you spend that much? Why would you do it? On the same hand, up in St. Louis, Missouri, we have chiller units that are 420 tons of cooling. And last July I watched those guys lose one compressor, and over 4th of July weekend, they lost 21 compressors. We talked to the company and said, hey, look, this unit is only a year old. We're losing compressors like crazy. Oh, yeah, it's a domino effect. It's just too hot outside, they said. Don't worry, it's under warranty. We're going to ship you these three-phase compressors. They're about 10 weeks out. Now, I've got to go back and look this grower in the eye and tell him, buddy, just shut your lights off for 10 weeks. When we get the compressors, we'll get you back up and running. So I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see, or the biggest fail point that I see, is buying equipment that looks really nice and shiny on an expo floor, that you can't find parts to replace it. And even if you can find parts to replace it, where do you get a tech that knows how to work on something like that? When we're talking working in, downtown Denver, sure, there's probably 100 service techs, like at the most, 100 service techs that can work on a 40, 50-ton chiller system. If you're out in rural New York or, middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, just say middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, and you have a chiller system that fails, where are you going to find a guy that knows how to work on that, let alone the parts and pieces? So I think, it's definitely something you have to pay attention to, not just necessarily the equipment and your usage, but also your geographically where you're at in the world, where if you can get somebody to come in and show up right away to fix those issues?
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things we've encountered in the past is people buying systems that were large enough to cool their room, but also so monolithic that, and then not variable speed. So basically it would kick on, it would drop the temperature 10 degrees in a matter of minutes, and then it would kick off, and 5 minutes later the temperature's back up. So every 5 minutes you've got a 10-degree temperature swing. Plants don't like that. That doesn't happen in nature that way. So they were not growing as optimally as they could because their HVAC system was not correctly tuned to their environment.
That's part of the art of what you do, right? Yeah. Though, like getting it so, because you say, yeah, I can get you down to that temp. Sure, I throw some AC, that'll get you down. But that's the art is what we like to see, even though we don't get involved, but we get involved in the grow after. We do the cleanup like you. After everybody's left, we're trying to help people figure out how to grow properly with the lights. And we often see that stuff Kevin's talking about. We want to see that really nice, smooth, level. How does that come in, and how do you address that sort of issue that Kevin's bringing up in the grow rooms?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it goes back to just being as simple as in a custom home or like at your house, right? If you're in your house and, right now, like you guys said, it's over 100 degrees here, right? Um, that air conditioner kicks on and runs for 10 minutes and then shuts off. And then 10 minutes later kicks on again and it keeps fighting like that. You know that unit's struggling to keep up and it's got to be sized wrong, right? Because if it was sized correctly, it would run smooth, just like you're saying, and you wouldn't have those spikes. You wouldn't deal with that in your house. You sure wouldn't deal with that in a grow facility where you have plants that are relying on, like you say, maintaining that whatever type of environment you're trying to create, right? We learned a long time ago through VPD that by using what we would call so by using variable speed fans, variable speed compressors, we can chase VPD a lot better. It's still not a perfect science, right? We're still trying to get that dialed in as close as we can. But like you were just saying, if we go 10 minutes on and then it takes 20 minutes to catch up and then 10 minutes on, 20 minutes, where we're constantly hitting a 10-degree fluctuation in a room, that's too much. You're asking for powdery mildew. You're asking for just the plants, struggling, and all of that affects your weight too. That's what a lot of guys don't understand. That oh well, I'm gonna get through it, and it's just summertime, and once we take down at the end of the summer, then we're gonna have more money to put into our mechanical system. Where the fact of the matter is, your summer yield isn't going to be as good as your winter yield because you're dealing with a lot more fluctuations than you were last fall or whenever it was that you were harvesting that room. So yeah, I mean, I think really to that point, if you have rooms that are fluctuating more than 5 degrees, there's definitely some issues going on with the sizing of that equipment. Now, unfortunately, and I don't care what any of these guys say out there on the controls side of your HVAC system, it does take time for the unit to kick on, send a signal back to the thermostat, let the thermostat know that, hey, we're in a call for cooling or, vice versa, and sending that signal through. And that does take time. And unfortunately, most thermostats are made with a 5 to 10 minute delay. And that's done on purpose so that it helps protect your equipment so the equipment's not kicking on and kicking off and running the compressors too hard. Unfortunately, the technology has not caught up with this industry. I think it will get there one day. I know companies that are working. I know Honeywell. I work very intimately with Honeywell on a lot of their stuff that they're trying to come up with right now. Andon was owned by a company called April Air. April Air had been around for 100 years. They're working on a lot of stuff with controls right now. That is, they're really trying to make stuff instantaneous so that if you have an issue inside that room, it should be corrected through the control system. But there's a lot of different reasons why things do the way that they do. But it does usually come down to the unit's not sized correctly, or there was something else added to the room that gave a bigger heat load after that unit was designed.
Gotcha. Can you come back? So obviously, rule number one to getting it working right is do it right the first time, right? I mean, that's just rule number one. Assuming they screwed up, can you come into a facility that is displaying the type of behavior Kevin was describing, which I agree is one of the bigger problems? Can you come in after the fact and without spending a crazy amount of money, can you fix it or at least alleviate some of those problems a little bit?
Generally, yes. Because, again, that's one of the beauties with the system that we kind of figured out and the things that we do. We try to stick to, residential 5-ton splits. Even then, we can drop down to a 4-ton, 3-ton, 2-ton, whatever it is that's needed in those rooms. Split systems are a good band-aid to come in and fix already operating systems, where you could just come in and add in a couple 5-ton units and usually, relieve the issues. It's the same thing with the Andon just plug-in dehumidifiers, right? It's the same thing. You're going to add a dehu, you just plug it in. You can do that with air conditioners. It's not as easy as plugging it in, but it's, the same type of things. But usually what I see is guys are limited to power, right? Power is always the biggest issue. But the other part to that is too, it depends on what your existing mechanical system is. If you have a chiller system that was designed to do exactly that facility and exactly that many lights and exactly that many plants, and then you go add another flower room, and I've literally seen this where guys try to pipe off of an existing chiller and add fan coil units and then wonder why there's not enough glycol in their system, and why is this freezing and breaking during the wintertime. um, it's not that simple with those type of systems that were already designed. Um, of course, there's ways to fix things, and of course, there's band-aids that get you through really hard times. But for the most part, it's having the foresight walking into that building. Those are always my favorite, right? The ground ups, the new ones are always the best ones to be able to look at it and say, okay, now we've had 10 years of mistakes to learn from, and this is how we want to design this facility. But I can tell you right now, there was never one facility that I worked on in Denver, Colorado that was sized correctly and that worked correctly. It didn't happen because we were all flying by the seat of our pants. Nobody knew exactly what to expect, and there were a lot of band-aids that went on afterwards. And that's one of my funnest things now. Like we just picked up a new facility off of I-70 in Colorado. It's probably been 6 years since I've done a facility in Denver. And it's really cool that we get to go back and strip everything down and build it the right way. And, just walking into the room, you could tell, and this was a facility that has not been operational in about 6 years. Walking in the room, you could see where the problems were, right? You could see the water lines on the ductwork, the droplets on the floor, the way the benches were just, set up it all the way down. And it's so fun to be able to just walk into a room like that and say, oh, I could tell this happened here, then this happened, and then they were out of business. You can just see the writing on the wall. You can see how it happened. So There is ways to fix any facility. We've done it for years. Since the beginning of this, we've been going back and fixing facilities. But it is always nicer to be able to get that clean canvas and set it up the right way from jump, you know?
Yeah, we love getting involved in a nice clean slate project when it's early enough, when it's not just that it's more fun, it's also you feel like you can be more impactful, right? Like you can help the customer not make the mistakes that we've all learned in the last 10, 15 years, right? We've been selling lights for going on almost 15 years now. And like you, I don't go through a day, I don't learn something, generally from Kevin. And we learn a lot here. And yeah, in 10 to 15 years, we've learned a lot. So yes, it is nice to get involved early and be able to offer the customer that wisdom. So you say, look, you're much better off learning from our mistakes than your own, but you're welcome to spend the money and learn from your own if you really want to. So, but it is nice to get involved early. If you could give, somebody's out there, so we know that if somebody's got a couple facilities on their belt and you work with a lot of old timers, people that know what they're doing now, they don't need as much hand holding. They kind of know the drill, they know what they're doing, they know what to expect working with you. But we still get in new states, like we were just talking about, whether we're talking about right now Ohio, or maybe some of the new licenses in Minnesota or New York you were just talking about. Up there, you still have new people getting in the game that they know HVAC from their house, but as you've brought up, that is not what we're dealing with in a grow room. It's a different world. If you could offer one piece of advice to somebody that's never done a grow facility, not only HVAC, but has never done a grow facility, and they're like, I just got me a new license here up in New York, whatever. What advice would you give them?
I don't want this to sound cliche because I'm on your guys' podcast, but the very first thing that I tell everybody is, pick your lights, get your lights. Your lighting is the most important. I can't design anything. You can tell me all day long, I got 3,000 square foot, I got 28,000 square foot, I got 100,000. I don't care. None of that matters. I want to know what kind of lights you're going with. Why are you going with those lights? Why did you pick those? And then the first step for me when I'm coming to build it is to get involved with the lighting manufacturer because I want to know everything about those lights. That's what's going to drive the entire project. So no matter what, it's always the lights. I won't talk to them unless they know what kind of lights they want. I can introduce them to different guys. I can tell them what it is, but the most important thing in any grow facility is you got to get the lights first.
They are the most impactful. I mean, we are going to be, we wouldn't like to, we don't like to be, but we are the biggest energy draw other than maybe the HVAC system, maybe. So yeah, it's I think why from the time we met E3 and got involved, sat with you and your whole team and some of your engineers that you have on your team there. And, Joe and I came out and visited, and why we mesh so well is because, yeah, we have the same ethos. As soon as we say you should pick your lights, because that's going to dictate a lot. First, we say find a facility. Yeah, you get it too. We have to play with make-believe facilities. But first, find your facility a little bit. That's helpful. Next, pick your lights. But then your next stop should be HVAC. And we believe that because that's going to dictate so much. And they're going to need to know so much and be involved in so much of the project. Everything else can kind of come after. Everything else is load-based. We both like Andon. But you're going to go to Andon once I know my loads, once I know my HVAC. I know how many plants I'm putting there. I know my table size. I know my lights. So they come down the road. But yes, I think that's why we get along, is because we know where everybody needs to come in. And yes, lighting and HVAC need to be happening up front because they're going to dictate a lot of it right there, right? The power load, it's just, yeah, it's massive out there.
I get calls so many times from people that are like, hey, we want you to come help us pick out a building. We've got it narrowed down to like 6 or 7 buildings. We want to know what, and the fact of the matter is like I've literally built grows in chicken coops. I mean, I've built grows in banks, I've built grows in malls, I've built grows in jails. We can turn anything into a grow facility, right? I mean, all that stuff comes after the fact, but you have to know what kind of lights you're going with.
Yeah, yeah. Jails, I've seen a few projects with jails. I got to ask, man, making punctures through walls and through surfaces in a jail must bring some different challenges maybe? Are those all reinforced? Did it change your game? Are you getting out like dynamite to get through the walls?
I'll tell you the biggest issue that we had with those were that obviously the rooms were not big enough. You're talking 10 by 10 rooms. And so, when you're talking about the HVAC system, we're going with split system or mini splits, and you're going to put a 1 ton mini split in every friggin' room. But, it's not set up for the flow, but everybody, the guys that were involved with that project in particular, oh, security's great. There's more than enough power. There's more than enough water you can do, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it, right?
Well, yeah, and that's where it's not just HVAC you have to consider when you're picking a building for a facility, but as you point out, a bunch of small rooms is not ideal. A lot of home growers or underground growers are used to growing in tents, and okay, that works, especially if the tent is small enough that you can access everywhere from outside the tent. But as soon as your room is big enough, you need aisleways to get in there, then the smaller the room is, the more space is wasted on the aisles. And at this same time, on the other side of the coin, if you have a giant 100 by 100 foot room, I mean, I remember going through a facility, I think it was actually off of I-70 in Colorado down in Denver about a decade ago, and it was one giant open warehouse, no walls anywhere. They literally just had their veg plants on one side of the warehouse, and then 50 feet away, they started the flowering plants. No breaks for insects, no light blockage, nothing. I imagine they probably failed, but anyhow, that is not ideal either. There's a happy medium of room size where you can, if you do have an outbreak of powdery mildew, you can contain it and only contain your losses in one small room.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a guy call me from Las Vegas a couple weeks ago. Oh man, I've had every HVAC company out here come and look. Nobody can figure it out. We got to know. I got your number. Now you're talking about, Las Vegas. There's more air conditioning in that city than any place else in the world, right? So for him to tell me he's had 10 HVAC guys there and nobody knows what the problem is, it's not the HVAC guys, right? So I said, okay, all right, well, let's get down to it. What are your lights? How many lights you got? I got 600 lights. No, I mean per room. Yeah, I got 600 lights per room. I said, bro, you need walls. You don't need HVAC. That's all there is. And that's the truth. You're absolutely right, and besides, being able to contain any kind of outbreak and stuff like you're saying, the hot spots and cold spots that we deal with through rooms like that are just massive. The one I doing another one in Missouri, those rooms are bigger than football fields. They're 338 by 164. And it's just, I mean, to hear those poor growers that are in there every day just trying their best to control every piece of this, there's just no way in a room that big. And
No.
so they can be too small and they definitely can be too big.
What is it with Missouri? We have a customer out there, and when we got a hold of them, there's a great example. They were far enough along, they needed lights, but the facility was already designed. And we get it, we said, first thing we said is, no, break this apart. One giant flower room in the center of the building, right? We're like, no, that's horrible. All your eggs in one basket right there, man. And they're like, it's too late. We're too far in. We can't adjust that. It was, a lot of the engineering was done, and I don't know what it is with Missouri. But that actually brings me to one of the other reasons we like working with you is the redundancy concept. We often push that a lot, whether it's how we design our lights that Kevin's put together there, or whether it's selecting end-ends. It's like, don't put one giant dehu there. Put 4 in the corners or 2 at each end or whatever. Why? That gives you more balance and less microclimates, but you can maybe limp by with one, but if you had 2 and 1 goes out, but if you have 1 and it goes out, you're dead in the water. So your idea of using many mini splits or the split systems, that's great because you have the redundancy. Out of curiosity, when you put over, let's say 400 units at a facility, I just got to ask, are they even buying hot swap units just to keep on site? Because if I had 400 or something, I'm like, one of them's going to break just by odds, right? So I'd have my own parts closet and a whole system on site. Why? Just because I just have to have the tech come out and I got the parts. Do you guys go that far when you have that many number of the identical systems?
It definitely does. As a contractor, I hate putting that on the owner, right? You guys are not an HVAC supply house. You should be using every square inch of this to grow flower. Don't be worried about the storage, whatever. What we do, and thank God, a lot of this has to do with Carrier. Carrier will supply me with 2 or 3 extras when we're doing large facilities. And then what happens is we usually find a storage facility, or if it's one of the states I have an office in, we store those on site so that we have extras to swap out. But I can tell you that that's the beauty in working with a company like Carrier and working with residential equipment, because just like right now, this is, I mean, this is our time of year, right? I probably got 3 or 4 people call me every day because their house is, their air conditioner went out on their house. I've never had a time where I've gone down to Carrier and said, "Hey, I need this residential 5-ton compressor," and they've told me, "Oh, you got to wait 2 or 3 weeks." You're like, that does not happen. It can't happen. You can't leave people with no air conditioning when it's 100 degrees outside, and they know that. So, Carrier has supply houses from sea to shining sea all across this country. There's no place that I have built a grow that I couldn't get to a Carrier supply house in less than an hour. I mean, they're everywhere. Even every small town you go to, everybody's got an air conditioner. So we try really hard not to put that on the customer, to always keep extra parts and pieces on hand. I mean, sure, it's a smart idea. What we found out back in the early days, I had some customers that would do that, and they would say, "No, no, no, we just want to buy a couple to keep them here." And essentially, what happens is now they call us because something fails. We can't get there quick enough. They have their grower who watches some YouTube videos, decides he's an HVAC guy, takes the compressor out, goes to swap it out upstairs. And I have seen stuff like this, and catch the roof on fire, catch the rooftop on fire, I mean, just compound the issues. So I try really hard not to leave things on site. We've learned a lot about how quick we need to respond too. Like I said, those were the early days. Now, somebody calls me now, I mean, we have a plan to have those swapped out in less than an hour. But with putting in the redundancy of the 5-ton split systems, and with Honeywell, I work off of a monitoring system that, it's made for residential houses, but it works just great for us in grow facilities. It'll send me an alert if there's a compressor out or if there's an issue with the air conditioning. It charts everything so I can watch and see what happens at nighttime versus daytime, and humidity spikes. And that, that doesn't even have a monthly charge. It's a residential thermostat. And so I can log into that Honeywell right from my phone. I can control it. I can monitor it, but it also sends me alerts. So as an HVAC contractor in cannabis, I take control of those thermostats. I also give control to the growers, anybody else that they want. But essentially, I know your air conditioner's broke before you know your air conditioner's broke. And I'm rolling trucks before you even know there's an issue. And so a lot of times, if we only, I've only seen it one time where we've lost 2 air conditioners in a room. Usually, if you lose more than one, it's an electrical issue, right? There's something going on with the power grid. But um, if we lose one air conditioner and there's 6 more in that room, chances are nobody even notices. So yes, building the redundancy into the room. I learned a long time ago, yes, we're putting in 423 air conditioners on this roof, or you can put in 2 chillers. But the fact of the matter is that when these fail, and they will, no matter what, I can get your parts down the street. It's under warranty. We know how to do this. And look, you just need a residential HVAC guy, which every town has a residential HVAC guy, right? So when you start trading off costs, I think that's something that you really need to weigh in your mechanical system, right? I mean, sure, maybe something may be a cheaper design or a more efficient design where you're not paying as high on the power bill. But on the same hand, what happens when that fails? Because to me, if I, was to save, $150,000 on the upfront build, but it saved $2 million worth of product, I'm spending the 150K. I'm going to make sure that's taken care of. But so I think you really have to look at it from that, holistic approach of, it's not just build this and walk away. It's build this and stay here for 20 years.
Yeah.
And that is the key, right? You know, the old days of cash cropping in and out are gone, where everyone should be in it to win it for long term. Make the investment and ride it out. You know, get your return on your investment, make your money. Don't try and get in and out quickly. Those days, I think, are behind us, and that's not a bad thing, right? If we can get a slightly better infrastructure around what we do. So, you know, I know it is your busy season, but it's also interesting to talk about this during your busy season. So can't thank you enough for your time today, Bryson. Look forward to working with you on more projects. Like I said, I learn something every time I talk to you. Definitely learned something today. Really appreciate our viewers for tuning in today and checking this out. If you have other suggestions or comments or anything, please don't hesitate to hit us up. We will be posting this on our social media. You can find Bryson if you Google E3 Service Group. We'll try and put some links in some of the descriptions. But once we're in social media, we'll definitely be tagging Bryson and all that. So if you need to find E3, we definitely recommend him, whether you've got a brand new one, hopefully, or you're trying to fix an existing problem, which don't feel bad, that's pretty common in our industry. Bryson could definitely help you out. So we vouch for him and his services all day long and twice on Sunday. So thanks again, Bryson, for joining us. See you again real soon, and you take care and stay cool out there.
Right on, buddy. Yeah, guys, thank you so much for the time. We'll see you later.
All right, take care.